Morning, Wasim, and good morning, everybody out there, wherever you are. If you're here in the US or you're elsewhere in the world, I'm Erin Skelly. I'm the Assistant Director for Berkeley International Office for Student Services. So I lead our student team, and I'm so excited to welcome you virtually and looking forward to seeing you guys next week as your bodies arrive in the US if they're not here, as you wander the campus, and we'll be excited to see you. So give me just a moment. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to go over the most exciting part of the day because this is what I love, immigration rules. So I'm a nerd. I know we are all nerds here because we are Berkeley people, and I cannot wait to geek out with you on what it means to be in proper immigration status. So let me share my screen and make sure I don't break the Zoom meeting, and then we'll get ready to go. All right. Let's see. Wasim, can you let me know which screen you're seeing?
We are seeing your presentation slide for Immigration Essentials.
Okay, is it the presenter view or is it the
It's the
good-looking one?
slideshow. It's the good-looking one.
Okay, super. So we're ready to go. Okay, everyone. So we are here for Immigration Essentials. And we do have a Q&A session later, but because I have a little bit of extra time, I'm likely able to take some questions if you have them here, but we'll also be having Q&As later with our staff members if you do have more detailed questions. And I want to say, I know that you're very excited about employment, and I'm not talking about employment. That's a different presentation. I will mention it, but that's a different presentation. Okay, so here we go. First stop is, well, I want to talk a little bit about enrollment. So you are all here coming to the US in F1 or J1 immigration status. And that means that your purpose in life in entering the US from the perspective of US immigration is to be a full-time student. That is how the government views you, that's why you're here. All of these immigration rules come out of that primary purpose, that your purpose in life in being here is to be a full-time student who does student things, and that is your main job. Your main job isn't working. Your main job isn't hanging out with friends. Your main job is being a student. That's what the government views it. So that's why a lot of the rules are the way that they are. So starting out, I just want to give you an enrollment reminder because the purpose of your visa status is that you have to come to the US to do your studies. That means your body needs to be physically present here in the US to study. So you are limited in how much online enrollment you are permitted. Why? Well, logically, the government says if you don't need to be physically present in a classroom, or you don't have to show up somewhere and be present, you don't have a reason to come to the US. So just keep that in mind, that a lot of this is built around that you have to have a reason to be physically present here to do the things that you're supposed to do. So a reminder, you are required to enroll full-time, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but online coursework is really limited. Your enrollment must be primarily in-person coursework, and only one class or 3 units of online coursework is allowed due to the F&J visa regulations. So if you're looking for classes, you can use the Berkeley Academic Guide, and that allows you to filter for mode of instruction. A class is totally online if the course instructional mode is listed as online or web-based. You might have a class that has multiple components. So you might have a class that has an in-person lecture and an in-person lab, and then maybe a remote or online study session or study section. That's okay. At least one course component has to be coded as in-person instructional mode. So I'm just mentioning this now because it's something that's been popping up, I don't know, since COVID, that sometimes students get enrolled in too many online classes, and then we have to remind you. So just making sure that as you are working on your enrollment coming up, you're aware that you're only allowed to have one online class counting towards your full-time enrollment. Okay, so let's get into the rest of this. All right, number one, things can change quickly in the immigration world, so stay up to date. We update our website. We send you guys a lot of emails, okay? But you need to read them. When we send you emails, they're going to come in one of two forms. Our newsletter, which is really helpful and often contains immigration reminders. But you may receive emails directly from us that contain warnings, like you're not enrolled full-time, or you're not enrolled at all, or we're reminding you about deadlines, about applying to extend your documents, about applying for your post-completion work authorization. Please, please read those emails. It's really important, and often we're desperately trying to get to you to remind you of something really, really important. And then if you have questions, you're always welcome to visit us virtually, in person, or to email us. Okay, so let's get into it. Your F1 or J1 student status. So on our website, we have top 10 rules for maintaining your F or J student status. We're basically going to go over these rules during this presentation. Additional information that's specific for J1s, because F1s and J1 visas are a little bit different, but a lot of the rules for them are kind of the same. But J1s, the Department of State wants you to review the exchange visitor brochure and the J1 exchange visitor welcome brochure as well. We talked about that a little earlier, but I'm hitting you with it again because the Department of State wants to make sure that you review those things. But our top 10 tips for maintaining your status, that contains information about both the F1 and J1 visa statuses. And I see people are sending questions. I'm going to address this really quick. Someone asked, is only one online course allowed for all 4 years? It's each semester counting towards your full-time enrollment. So if you have 12 units, only 3 units or the equivalent of 1 class can be part of your full-time enrollment. So we'll talk about full-time enrollment soon. All right, so here are our top 10 rules, and we're going to go through them. So once again, getting your mind around the idea that you are here in a student visa status. That's your job. So the government cares that you're here doing the proper thing for the proper amount of time, and that they know where you are and that you're where you're supposed to be doing the proper thing. Okay, so number one, you need to maintain US physical presence and keep your US address and phone number up to date. Number two, you've got to enroll in full-time units. You're supposed to be a student and you're supposed to be doing that full-time. So you're expected to be enrolled full-time every semester. 3, get approval for course reductions and withdrawal. So the government's aware that things happen, that you may have illnesses or academic issues, or you may need to take a break. These things are okay, but you have to have approval in advance. You can't just make decisions on your own and tell us later. You need to understand your work permission. So yes, you have some work permission, it's limited. Why? Because your main job is to be a student. So that's what it is to be a student in the US on an F or J student visa that the government views. Your main job is to study. It's not a work visa. If you're on a work visa, your main job would be your job, which is to work. You need to, this one's obvious, number 5, you have to obey laws, regulations, and the student code of conduct. Number 6, attend the school on your I-20 or DS 2019. So Berkeley gave you a document. If any of you were issued a document from a third party, I think we have some J's who are here on Fulbright or other sponsored visas. If you got an I-20 or DS 2019 from another school, you need to be attending the institution that's listed on your documents. If you got a document from UC Berkeley, well, you're supposed to be enrolled full-time here. So if you're going to enroll at another school, you need to check with us because there are things we may need to do. Keep your documents valid. So you don't want things to expire. So you need to put reminders in your phones about when things expire. Make sure you know. Understand your travel documents. You're permitted to go in and out of the US using your documents, but you need to make sure you understand them and that you know how to travel. And then number 9, grace period. When everything's done, when you've finished your degree program or your exchange program, whatever it is you're here to do, you have a grace period during which certain things are allowed. So we'll talk about what that grace period is and how you can use it. And finally, health insurance. This is a requirement for J1s for their visa status, but at UC Berkeley, all students have to have appropriate health insurance coverage. We'll talk about that as well. And then we'll talk about dependents. If any of you have an F1 or F2 or J1 or J2, a J2 spouse or F2 spouse or children that are with you, we'll talk about that. And then J1s, we're going to talk briefly about your 2-year physical presence requirements. So I see a bunch of questions coming. I'll do my best to get to those, but you may want to hold them until the Q&A session if I'm not able to get through. And I would also say, let's wait on the questions until we actually get to the sections about them, because I might actually be answering your questions once we get there. Okay, first steps. So you are getting here or you are here. The first thing you need to do is to complete your arrival confirmation and then keep your address updated throughout your stay in the US. So complete your arrival confirmation. After your body enters the US, you go through Customs and Border Protection, you arrive in the US, you're here. We need you to complete your arrival confirmation. Your Cal Central has a task item for this, and you need to complete these task items. Number 1, arrival confirmation form. This will require that you upload what's called the Form I-94, and we give you instructions on how to do that. So you have to read. Welcome to Berkeley. Your world is now reading lots of things. And with our office, it's reading instructions. So we're going to walk you through this process of how to find your I-94 document. And you have to upload that to our system. That shows that you entered the US in proper F1 or J1 status. And we need you to submit a US address and phone reporting form. Yes, we need your US address and we need your US phone number. So please update that as soon as possible. It can be a temporary address. So if you just got here, you're staying in a hotel or a friend's house, go ahead and report that. And then when you change, you need to log in again to Cal Central and update your address within 10 days of any change. This is a government regulation that the government needs to know your address, where you sleep, where you live, not your lab address, where you work at school or where you attend class. That should not be where you're sleeping. If it is where you're sleeping, we need to talk about work-life balance. You need to be reporting where you actually live. And our arrival and address reporting form, again, will give you instructions on how to update your Cal Central address. Okay, so second piece, you're here in the US in an F1 J1 visa status, and you are expected to stay here and study. So you cannot be outside of the US for 5 or more consecutive months, or your F or J status will end. This didn't used to be an issue, but now with the flexibility of the world, it is far easier for students to be in different places and still be able to maintain their academics. This is not okay if a faculty member says, yes, it's fine for you to go home for a while and look after your mom and attend your sister's wedding, it's totally fine. You can study remote. I don't care. The US government cares, and your F1 or J1 visa status is going to end if you're outside for 5 or more months. You are expected to be in the US either studying in person full time, or after you graduate, engaged in full-time post-completion employment in the US. That's the point. If you can do what you want to do from abroad for 5 or more months, the government says, hey, it looks like you don't need an F1 or J1 visa status because you're busy outside of the US doing whatever it is that you're doing. So you don't need a visa status. The purpose of the visa status is to be in the US. So temporary absences are allowed. You're allowed to travel, but it can't interfere with your studies or your ability to work in the US if it's after graduation. So just keep that in mind. And if you have any extended travel needs, for more than a normal break period, please come and talk to us so we can see if that's going to work for you or if we need to find out a different option. Okay, next, enroll full-time. So you've got to enroll full-time each fall and spring. Full-time enrollment is determined by your academic department. For undergrads, for most departments, that's going to be 12 units. Undergrads, the College of Letters and Science requires 13 units. Some graduate departments, the minimum enrollment is lower. We have a web page linked on this slide, and you'll get copies of the slides that states the full-time enrollment requirements, for some of those special programs. But for the majority of you, it's going to be 12 units, or possibly if you're LNS undeclared or in an LNS major, 13 units. Out of that total enrollment, only one class or 3 units, so 3 units or the equivalent of one class, is allowed to be counted towards your full-time enrollment. So in other words, if you're enrolled in 12 units, you have one class that's allowed to be online out of that 12 units. The rest of your units and the rest of your classes must be in-person classes. So just imagine that you only get one online class per semester. It's not per year, but it's per semester. Summer is not enrolled unless summer is your very first or your very last semester of study. So if summer is a break, you've been enrolled in spring and you'll be enrolled again in the fall, and it's like a sandwich in between those semesters, you are permitted to take a vacation in summer. You don't have to enroll in summer. But if you're graduating in summer, your I-20 ends in summer, or if your I-20 begins in a summer term, then you are required to be enrolled full-time in that summer, or to get an improved reduced course load if you're graduating in summer. Also, check with your academic departments. If you're in a graduate program that requires your enrollment for summer, that's not a visa rule, but it may be that your department wants you to enroll in summer. Okay, so those are your enrollment rules, and also your address reporting. So basically the basics of that are you've got to be here, you've got to be enrolled. So let's talk about study and your work-life balance. Reduced course load. So things happen. Everybody has struggles, challenges, things that happen unexpectedly. So this is built into the student visa rules that the government does allow a reduced course load for certain types of reasons. Those are academic reasons, medical reasons, and in your final semester. And that is the end of the reasons. So academic reasons, those are limited to issues in the first semester of arrival in the US. So that's if you're having trouble with reading requirements, English language requirements, stuff like that. None of these reasons allow an increase in online enrollment. Okay, we cannot get around that online enrollment rule, but this can allow a reduction in the number of units for a semester. So if you have a legitimate academic reason in your first semester, or anytime if you're having a serious medical issue and you've been seeing a licensed US medical doctor or licensed US psychologist or psychiatrist, then you may qualify for a reduction in course for medical reasons. However, your academic department also has to approve that. And final semester for degree-seeking students only. Exchange students, this does not apply to you because you're not graduating from Berkeley. But if you're graduating, you're earning a degree, a bachelor's, master's, PhD, law degree. In your final term, if you just need less units to graduate, if you only need 5 units to graduate, we can approve that. All of these things require approval in advance. We have to give you written authorization. For F1s, we have to add authorization onto your I-20. So just please keep in mind that although these allowances exist, you have to ask for them. They're not automatic. So if you think you need to reduce your course load, you need to meet with a bio advisor, and we'll give you instructions on how to apply for a reduced course load. Next, employment. So all I'm going to say is we have an employment webpage that outlines all of the information about employment under F1 or J1 visa status. What I'm going to tell you about immigration rules is do not work without proper authorization. It's a huge violation of visa status. The government is very serious about work violations. They're very sensitive about that. You're here to study. You're not here to work illegally. So don't do that. It's not okay. Working without authorization is pretty serious. And it's one of those things that you might think, well, nobody's going to find out, or it's okay now. When it tends to come out as later when you're applying for a real work visa or a green card, and they do a deep dive into your record, and then they discover employment records and that you were working without authorization, and that's when it really matters. So more information is going to come in our Working in the US presentation. So I'm not going to answer any questions now about employment, but you have some options, and we're going to tell you about them. Okay, academic conduct and extracurricular activities. Wasim, can you remind me what time we're finishing?
You have until 9:55.
Oh my gosh.
And then we'll take a little break. So if you need to give a longer break, no worries.
All right, I'm doing great. Okay, so UC Berkeley takes academic integrity really seriously. So academic misconduct can lead to suspension or dismissal from the university. Basically, that is because, and that impacts your visa status. So why? Well, if you get suspended or dismissed, you can't enroll full-time and you can't go to school. If you can't go to school, you can't keep your visa status. So it all kind of comes out of that. So you have to behave in academically ethical ways and make sure that you don't end up suspended or dismissed from the university. If you have any kind of student conduct issue, please check in with our office as soon as possible, because we want to help you make sure that you get support. And if anything is going really wrong, we want to help you think about your strategies and your options to protect your visa status. So here's some examples of academic misconduct. Cheating, that one's obvious, like cheating on a test. Plagiarism, so using someone else's work as your own. And self-plagiarism, that means if you wrote a paper for another class and then you submit it to a class 2 years later, you just plagiarized yourself, and that is also not allowed. And I do want to say about this, we're seeing a lot of plagiarism coming in the form of inappropriate AI use, where you're told that you're not permitted to use AI for creating code, for creating your essay exams, things like that. And then you're presenting the work of the robot as your work. So just keep this in mind. We're seeing more and more conduct cases. So make sure you're reading your syllabi and you know what you're allowed to do. Assume that you have to do all your own work and not use anyone else's assistance to produce your work. Unauthorized group work or collaboration, falsification, that means you're using fake data or whatever. So that's academic misconduct. Also, we have extracurricular activities. You can get out there in the world, meet new friends, take part in all these fun activities. But activities that you engage in on and off campus can impact your visa status. So this here is a picture of students engaged in protest Welcome to Berkeley. Berkeley is the home of the free speech movement. You have the right to free speech too, but just keep in mind that you don't control how other people behave. So in your life, you always need to be safe, protect yourself, be smart, think about where you're going, what activities you're engaged in, and always be peaceful. If you have interpersonal or romantic relationships, respect consent. You'll get training in sexual harassment and sexual violence. Please pay attention to that, as norms around consent may differ from where you may be coming from or your cultural context. So just be aware. We get a lot of questions. Is it okay for me to go to a protest? Or is it okay for me to go out with my friends at night? Of course it is. Yes, you are allowed to show up at a protest. You are allowed to have your voice be heard, but you don't control what happens there. So if other people start misbehaving and you're in a situation that you can't control, the police get involved, just keep in mind you're an international person who there are different impacts if you get arrested or if something crazy happens. So just keep that in mind. That's about being safe and being smart. So make your voice heard, but always be safe, smart, peaceful. And then here's examples of behavioral misconduct. We don't need to go through all this. It's a bunch of things that I don't imagine you're going to be doing. So don't do any of these bad things. And if you have any kind of issue, please contact us. But what I do want to get to is these are things that we see more commonly. So I want to tell you all now some news that you may or may not be aware of. So cannabis is legal in California. This is marijuana, recreational marijuana. However, it is federally illegal. That means that the major government of the United States, the government that maintains your visa status, federal regulations, federal law, so the law of the entire US, it is still federally illegal. That means it is illegal for you. It doesn't matter that California has decriminalized it or other states. It does not matter. For you, this is illegal. Cannabis use, possession, or even possession of, quote, drug paraphernalia, the things to use cannabis, can lead to deportation or arrest. I have seen students every year deported from the border, sent home for use of this. Also, drug and alcohol violations are really serious for the US government, and they can lead to bars from the US and future inadmissibility, meaning you are sent home and you cannot come back for years. And you may have to engage attorneys and go through a number of hoops to be able to come back. So just keep this in mind. You have to obey state and federal laws. I know it's confusing, but just say this is not for me when I get here because these rules apply to you. And yeah, they don't necessarily apply to your US citizen or permanent resident friends. And for those of you who are a bit younger, the legal drinking age in the US is 21, and many of you are not 21 yet. So you do not get to drink alcohol in the US. You can have many delicious beverages, but not alcohol, okay? So you've got to find other stuff to do. And when you're 21, then it's legal, and then you won't be in trouble with the police for drinking. And of course, don't drink and drive. If anything happens, anything crazy, if you have an encounter with the police, law enforcement, come to us. We want to help you. We want to get you connected with legal support. Okay, we're not here to report on you. We are here because we want to help you. So if anything happens, please make us one of your first stops so we can get you supported. Okay, so then let's get into travel and immigration document maintenance. So we've gotten through all of the naughty things that could happen, but now we want to get to, okay, taking breaks, traveling, visiting home, visiting other places. So what do you need? So here are the required entry documents for enrolled students. So if you're coming into the US, you've left the US and you want to come back to the US, you will need your passport, and that should generally be valid for at least 6 months into the future, meaning your expiration is valid until at least 6 months from your reentry. You have a valid F or J non-immigrant visa, unless you're Canadian. If you're Canadian, hello Canadians, neighbors to the north, you don't need a visa stamp in your passport. That's the only thing that's special about you. I know you're all special for many other reasons. We're all special people here, but the US and Canada have one thing about their relationship where we say, hey guys, you don't have to put a visa in your passport. That's the only thing that's different, okay? They just save you a trip to the embassy. You have to obey all the other rules. You have to have all the other documents. But everybody who's not Canadian, you need an F or J visa in your passport, and it needs to be unexpired at the time of your entry. You need a printed out, signed I-20 or DS-2019. We email you those documents. You need to print out that document and sign it with your human hand. We get to sign electronically. You don't get to sign electronically. And don't just have it on your phone and shove your phone at the border officer's face. Okay, they don't like that. And they want a piece of paper to look at. So you have to print it out, carry it with you. You need evidence of your financial resources. So your funding documents, proof of your enrollment. Why? Well, what's your point here? What's your job? You're an enrolled student, so you have to have proof of your enrollment. And proof of your SEVIS fee payment. That's that fee. You went to FMJ fee, you paid the fee. Just always keep a copy of that. You can get asked for these additional documents, the funding, your enrollment, your SEVIS fee payment. Officers may ask you questions about your reason for entering the US, where you're going, your academic program. So make sure you're awake enough to answer questions if you've come off a long flight, and that you can articulate why you're here. What are you doing? You're here to study. You're coming to UC Berkeley. What do you study? What's your major? It's okay if you're undeclared. You can say, well, I'm thinking about majoring in business or whatever it is. If you have problems, contact us immediately. And we have lots of details on our travel and reentry webpage. Okay, so BIO's travel and reentry webpage has all these documents. This is an I-20, and on the second page of that I-20 is a travel signature. This is a DS-2019. The first page of your document, it's only a one-pager. We sign for travel in that section that you can see at the bottom right. This is a passport. Here's a visa. So your passport, valid for 6 months in the future. It can't be renewed outside the US. It can be renewed inside the US. You have to contact your embassy or consulate for renewals. And if it'll expire soon, you need to contact that consulate. We can't help you with the passport renewal because that's between you and your home country. The visa, it's an entry document. So the interesting thing about the visa is once you enter the US, it's okay if it expires. It's not a big deal because it's like a key to get in the house. When you come through the border, you use the key to unlock the door. And then once you're in the house, you don't need the key anymore. Okay, but if you leave again, don't leave without your house key. You need it to get back. So check your expiration date. Also check how many entries you got. If it says M, that means you can come and go using that visa as long as your other documents are valid, you're in proper status, you can keep using it until it expires. If it only has a number there under entries, you can only enter once or enter twice according to that number. And we have more information about this on our website. The only place you can get a new visa is at an embassy abroad. There's no secret way to renew it in the US. So if it's expired and you're traveling, then you'd need to renew it before you can come back. But there's no way to renew your visa, that stamp in the passport, inside the US. You have to leave the US, be physically present, and apply for a new visa at a country outside of the US. That's just how visas work. Okay, your I-20 or DS-2019. The travel signature, as I indicated, is on the I-20 second page, DS-2019 the first page. That signature is valid for 12 months while you're studying. After graduation, if you're on post-completion employment as an F1, it's only valid for 6 months. But once we sign, it's valid for 12 months while you're studying. For J1s, you will get an updated DS 2019 within about the first 30 days of the semester, because we're not allowed to sign your travel when we send your first DS 2019, but we will send you a new one. And you can get new signatures or request an updated I-20 if your signature is expiring. Oh, there's lots of animations. Okay. So here's kind of a close-up of those travel signatures. So check the date. There'll be a date that we signed it. So you're looking at within 12 months of that. How do you get a new one? Sign in for virtual drop-in advising if you want a same-day experience, or visit our in-person office for same-day experience. But if you come in person, you need the paper document. You need to print it out, bring the paper to our office. We can't digitally sign something that's on your phone. We need you to print it out, bring it to our office. Or you can submit a replacement document request. This is the easiest. Just think ahead. It'll take us 5 business days. We'll email you a new I-20 or DS 2018 straight to your inbox. You don't have to visit us. You don't have to wait in line. So just think ahead. Or you can, and this is not popular, you can come to our office, drop off your paper document, and we'll sign it and get it back to you, and you can pick it up 5 days later. I don't recommend this, but if you really like having a walk and using paper documents, you're welcome to do that. Okay, the CVSB payment, this is what you went to www.fmjfee.com and paid. That's for the maintenance of your CVS record. It's a government fee. You only pay it once per record. You can print a receipt by going there, clicking check I-901 status, and then you follow the instructions to print your fee payment. And then some tips on arrival. Some more travel tips. Carry all your required documents with you, not in your check bag. So have them with you in your carry-on so you can locate them. If possible, arrive during our office hours, Monday to Friday, 10 to 12 or 1 to 4. That way, if you have a problem, you can request that Customs and Border Protection call us. I recommend always coming through San Francisco as your port of entry. They're a friendly port of entry. We have a good relationship with them. If you're going through other ports of entry, you know, some of them are stricter. Some of them are more or less likely to call schools if there's a problem. So I advise you to do your best to come through SFO. Don't bring restricted items. So there's rules about traveling with medicine, food, or pets. Make sure you understand those rules. And of course, as we discussed, medical and recreational marijuana is totally illegal under federal law. If you've got it or you have paraphernalia associated with it, you may be deported and sent back home. Also be aware the government can inspect your electronic devices. So there are some tips for how to prepare your devices for travel. It's not common, but they could ask to look at your laptop or look at your phone. So think about how you're presenting yourself. What's on your phone? Does it look like you're doing illegal things? Or, you know, anything that you wouldn't want the government looking at and noticing what you're doing in your photos or in your social media apps, things like that. All right, so attend the school noted on your I-20 or DS 2018. I'm just going to hop over this. Basically, if you are coming to Berkeley from another school, we need to transfer your I-20 to our school, unless you're sponsored by a third party like Fulbright or something like that. But otherwise, if you're here studying at Berkeley, you need to have a document from Berkeley and you need to work with your school to get you transferred. Transfer out. If you decide you want to study at another school full-time, we need to transfer your I-20 or DS 2019 to a new school so you can go study there. There's a process for it. Come talk to us if you're considering this. Also, concurrent enrollment classes at other schools. So if you're an undergrad, you decide to take a couple classes at a community college, that's not going to count for visa purposes as part of your full-time enrollment. We only count enrollment at UC Berkeley towards your visa requirement. Your college, maybe they will accept the credit, but credit is different than the visa requirement. Visa requirement means you're enrolled full-time at the school listed on your document, and that's UC Berkeley. And then completing your program. So time flies, and eventually you may expire or come to a point where your documents are expiring. So you need to keep that document valid at all times and understand your completion date. So if you are expiring, you've got a completion date on your documents on the DS 2019 and on the I-20. If you need more time to study, you have to request an extension before you expire. We will email you probably a total of about 8 times in your final semester. I will tell you every semester I hear students say, nobody told me. We really did. We will email you a bunch of times saying, hey, you're expiring, do this, here's some instructions, do this. You have to take action to extend. Nobody will do it for you. So keep that in mind. None of these things is automatic. You always have to make requests of our office, but we will try to make sure you do it. We'll do our best. So you have a grace period. So your main goal here is to study. When you're finished, you have some time to, when you're finishing, you have some time to decide what to do next. So F1s, once your I-20 expires, you have a 60-day grace period, 60. J1s, you have a 30-day grace period. J1s, I'm sorry you get less. It's just how the rules are written. We didn't write the rules. I'm just telling you how it is. And no, there's no way to extend it to be more like the F1s. That's just how it is. So for F1s, your grace period operates a little bit differently. So during your 60 days, you have 60 days to exit the US. Once you exit, your status is over if you haven't taken any other action. So you've got 60 days to leave. Or during that 60 days, you could request a transfer to a new school, or you could remain at UC Berkeley and change your educational level. So like if you're a bachelor's degree student, you get admitted to a master's program at Berkeley, we can change your level, and we have to create a new I-20 for you within that 60 days. Or you can finish applying for your OPT work authorization within your 60-day grace period. We'll talk about that during the employment session. So for you, you've got 60 days either to exit the US or finish your transfer or change of level or apply for your work authorization. Those are your options during your grace period. J1s, if you hit your expiration date on your DS 2019, your only option is to exit the US. So then you have 30 days to leave. Before you expire J1s, you can request to transfer to another school or apply for your J1 post-completion work authorization called academic training, but you don't get more time than that. You have to do things before you expire, and we will remind you, but you have to take those actions. But once you expire, you've got 30 days to exit the US. And reminder to everybody about that grace period. If you leave the US during your grace period, like you want to go visit your friend in Canada, but then you need to come back and catch a flight in San Francisco, you've got a problem because your documents just expired. So you need to make sure your post-completion travel is within the US or that you have alternate plans. So check in with our office if you have questions about that. All right, J1s, this is for you. You may or may not have the 2-year physical presence requirement. Certain J1 visitors are subject to this 2-year requirement. We have workshops about it. If you're subject to this rule, then all that it means is that if you wish to change to certain visa categories, H, which is a work visa, L, intercompany transferee, K, fiance, or permanent resident, green card. So these more serious long-term visas, if you want to change to one of those, you have to go back home to your home country of residence for 2 years, or you have to apply to waive the requirement. J2s, if you have a J2 spouse, they are subject to the rule if you are subject. J2s can't fulfill or waive the requirement separately. The J1 has to fulfill the rule. So one thing about this, not everybody is subject, but you're subject if you got funding from your home government or from the US government, or you're on a skill list that says you're in a certain area of study. And we indicated what our opinion was about it when we emailed you your J documents, and then it was likely marked on your DS 2019 or indicated when you applied for your visa. And then health insurance. Every student at the university is required to meet the health insurance mandate. Registered students are automatically enrolled in SHIP. If you don't want to have SHIP, you'd have to apply for a waiver. Waivers are really hard to get. There's a deadline. If you miss the deadline, it's just too bad. And you have to have very equivalent health insurance. It's really tough to get out of having SHIP. It's a great plan, and that's why, because it has very high qualifications. J1 students, it's part of your visa status that you have to have health insurance coverage that meets certain guidelines from the minute you set foot in the US until the minute you leave for the last exit. That includes post-completion training. SHIP meets the requirements while you're studying, but after graduation, you have to get appropriate insurance. We'll have more information about insurance during health and safety. So then J1's going back to your physical presence requirement. We do hold workshops that cover all aspects of this requirement if you're anxious about it. One thing I want to tell all of you J1s, if you're worried about the requirement, do not file a waiver for the 2-year home residency without talking to our office first. If you file a waiver and you get approved, we can't extend you anymore. So we don't want you to do that until you've gotten all your maximum extensions, including post-completion work. So just keep that in mind. The J waiver, it's not something you need to do right away. Come talk to us and we can talk to you about whether it's appropriate for you or needed. And we can talk a little bit more about that. Okay, last, dependents. So you can get a visa for your dependent if they're a child under 21 or a legally married spouse. Legally married means the marriage has been legally recognized in some country in the world. It doesn't have to be your home country, but you do have to be legally married, no civil partnerships, things like that. Has to be legal marriage. J2 spouses can apply for work permission. J2 dependents can study part-time or full-time in the US. That's J's. F2s, sorry, they are not eligible for any kind of work. Not at all. F2s can never, 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 never work. F2 children can attend elementary school, kindergarten, K through 12. F2 spouses and children can enroll at other academic programs like colleges and universities for less than a full course of study. So if you're an F2 and you want to take college classes, you have to take less than full-time units. Otherwise, you have to change to an F1. They say if you want to study at a university full-time, a college full-time, you have to be on an F1. F2 spouses can participate in studies that are avocational or recreational. So that means like hobby classes, fun classes, you can do that full-time. So if you want to go take a bunch of cooking classes, that's great. If you want to get a degree in the culinary arts, you need to change to F1. And then travel, you guys need all the same documents that the F1 does. You need your I-20, DS 2019, your J2 visa, your F2 visa, passport, but you need copies of all the primary status holders' documents. So you need copies of all your spouse's documents or a copy of all the parents' documents. All right, that is the end. I think I have a little bit of time. So let's see, we want you to have an enjoyable career. Don't violate your status. There's lots of rules. Just do your work. Don't work illegally. Update us. Stay enrolled. Don't stay over your grace period. We'll talk about scams later, but don't get scammed by weird people pretending they're from immigration. Just be safe and ask us questions. We are here to answer your questions. So Wasim, do you want me to take any questions now, or should we save it for the Q&A?
I can summarize some quick questions maybe
Okay.
before we take a break. And thank you so much, Erin. A lot of really important information. So some quick questions. I know Anna Maria Elena and Ignacy both asked a similar question. One question is Grammarly allowed, in terms of academic plagiarism and things like this? And Ignacy says, can you use AI to correct your writing?
So I'm really Gen X. I don't know what Grammarly is.
Grammarly is
But
like a plugin that you can use that will correct your grammar as you write, basically.
I think that's an excellent question for your instructors. And I would honestly look at your syllabi, because some classes will be really specific about what is and isn't allowed. And it could depend on what the class is. I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine, like, I use Microsoft Word. It's okay to have spell check on, right? Like, that's normal. But AI programs that are going to kind of create your language for you, I would be concerned about that, and I would check with your faculty. But if it's something that's just, underlining, maybe this isn't appropriate grammar, it's not entirely rewriting, I think if you have any doubts, then definitely check with your instructors to make sure. And it could differ in different classes, like if you're taking an English composition class, that could be really different, if what they are judging is your language and composition. So I would be mindful and just double check on those things.
Thank you. Great. Okay. A question from Chris, which I think is relevant to this session. For the initial entry to the United States, can you arrive after the program start date or start of classes?
It's not recommended. If you're going to arrive late, you need to contact our office and let us know what's going on. Generally, you are expected by the government to arrive before the start of classes. If you're having a problem, we need to understand what it is. If you're arriving after, number one, your first stop, you need to contact your academic advisors and find out if it's even okay for you. There are some programs at the university that will not allow you to arrive late, especially some graduate programs where if you're a day late, they say, nope, sorry. So first you need to see if it's academically allowable, then contact our office. And we'll need to know, well, what's the latest possible date that you will be academically allowed to enter? And then we will work with you on what your options are. But I would say it's not great. If you're an undergraduate, I do not recommend that. It's very, very difficult for undergrads to arrive late and make housing, be able to settle in and not fall incredibly behind in classes. Classes start up and everything's happening. Grad students, check with your departments to see what your options are as well.
Adve, I'm going to save your question about academic training for later because we have the employment working in the US session coming up. Scarlett has a question. If a student is on an F1 and they graduate and get a full-time job in the United States, do they have to exit the US to re-enter on a TN visa, or can it be switched if it's in a 60-day period? Scarlett, that question might be more in depth than for this session.
Yeah.
What would you say, Erin?
Yeah, I would say yes. So Scarlett, that's very specific. TN is not F1 status. That's a totally different visa category. We're going to be here to talk about your F1 employment options later. But if you're thinking about changing to a totally different visa category, of which the TN is a totally different category, that might be something you can be eligible for, but we're going to talk to you about what you can do with your F1. So we'll talk about that later. And I'm seeing some other questions come in the chat that look like they're about employment related things like Social Securities too. We'll talk about that later.
Nathaniel asks, could we add more time to the 30-day grace period through an ESTA?
My answer is that's complicated, and it's complicated. So the short answer is not really. You're welcome to leave and come back under an ESTA, but applying to the government, you'd essentially have to apply to change to a tourist type. It's a complicated and expensive application. We cannot help you with it. I would just say you've got a 30-day grace period. You need to use your 30-day grace period. You could leave and then re-enter under ESTA, and then that will change you to ESTA, but don't do that until you're done being a J or being an F, because once you re-enter under ESTA, welcome to the US, you're now a tourist. You can't do any student things. And that goes for your entire program. Never, ever, ever anyone raise your hand and say, I will never do this as long as I'm an F1 or J1. I will not enter the US under a tourist category while I'm a student or while I'm on post-completion employment. If you do that, great. You're now a tourist. Tourists cannot study and they cannot work. You'll break your status and you may not qualify for other benefits. So don't do that. It may seem like a workaround because your visa's expired, you don't have time. Do not come here on a tourist visa. If you do, you have to leave and come back again on the proper F1 or J1 status. In your grace period, if you leave, you've now left, your F1 or J1 status is done. If you re-enter under a tourist, then you're subject to whatever the rules are of that new tourist category.
Great, thank you, Erin. I think we've covered as many questions as we reasonably can before we take a break. If you do have more questions, reminder that we do have Q&A sessions coming up, and also sessions specific to health and safety in the United States and also working in the United States. So don't worry, your questions might get answered later. And if you have a specific question which is kind of really relevant to your situation, I recommend coming into our advising hours, which my colleague Jeremiah talked about a little bit earlier. We do have a lot of advising hours throughout the week. So if you do have a question which is specific to your situation, we invite you to come in and talk to us.